We're going to do a breakdown practice analysis, and what is, and we're going to specifically look only at one part right now. I'm only going to look at patient retention. So remember, when we talk about practice, there's four major profit centers. There's patient retention, the new patients, the fees you charge, and your overhead. Those are the four categories that will determine your profit. And remember, that's one of the three stages of income. So remember, exchanging time for money, which is what you're doing in your practice, there's only four profit centers. I just told you what they are. Only 1% of the millionaires become millionaires doing that. Number two is leveraging money. 14% of the millionaires become millionaires. That's typically through investing with the stock markets, bonds, mutual funds, things like that. And then 84% of the millionaires become millionaires through leveraging time. Okay. So let's just put, the reason I'm just sharing that with you right now is to put it in perspective. So you do need to know how to maximize your exchange of time for money for profitability. That is the first step to creating not only profit, but wealth. And so we have to know the core components. We've got to know those four profit points. And of course, mastering those four profit points is what maximizes your profit in your office. And then there's, the goal is to first maximize, the first goal is to maximize the number of visits per unit of time. Then it's to maximize the amount of dollars per unit of time. And then it's to leverage money, and then it's to leverage time. Those are the stair steps, okay? All right, and those are the stair steps to creating wealth. So what we're going to do is take a look at patient retention, and everything starts with patient retention. If you have bad patient retention, what does that mean? It means you're going to have to spend more time and money on marketing. What does that mean? It means you're probably going to have more bad patients, because when you have to spend more time on advertising, those aren't high quality patients. What does that mean? It means they're going to be more difficult. They're going to be harder. What does that mean? It means your overhead is going to be higher. What does that mean? It means your profits are going to be lower. So everything starts with knowing how to keep patients, everything. And so the better you are at keeping patients, the less new patients you need. It's easier to maximize your time for money, etc. So that's when we're talking about exchanging your time. And then after you maximize your amount of patients you see with your patient retention, then we start leveraging it. We start leveraging time in different ways to eventually moving to the associate doctor with those systems. That creates freedom and passive income. And then you start investing in real estate, and that's what creates wealth. So these are the steps. Now, when you look at patient retention, there's essentially three types of patient retention. There's the symptoms. That's what you're going to get. So if you don't know much, you're going to get what's called market forces. Now, what are market forces? Well, I don't want to go to the dentist today or tomorrow or the next day and pay $50 or $100. So nobody wants to come into a chiropractic office. They don't wake up in the morning going, oh, I can't wait to spend 22 minutes to drive to the chiropractor's office, wait 10 or 15 minutes, get treated for 10 or 15 minutes, and then another 22 minutes to drive home. That's not what they do. Okay, so having said that, let's go into, so that's market forces. The second type of patient retention is essentially the functional capacity. There's all kinds of models in the functional capacity. There's obviously the model you don't want is the symptom model. You don't want the patient's system. That's when they don't want to come, they don't want to stay, they don't want to pay, they don't want to refer, they want to live their life. They don't want to be in your office. So you have to have the knowledge and skill to change that. So there's three different models. So you don't want the market forces model, and that's typically the symptom model. And then there's what's called the functional capacity model, where they'll actually stay for a period of time to get their problem taken care of. And there's several different models. There's chiropractic biophysics. There's a subluxation model. We use the science of the 3 phases of healing model. There's homeopathy model, naturopathy model. So there's different models of patient education for that. And then there's the lifestyle model. That's when patients just stay regularly for care. Now that's not maintenance. That's not maintenance care. But that's when they stay. In other words, they don't just come for a problem, the problem get taken care of and they leave. Now they understand why they should get periodic and regular care. And there's a carrot, there's something to pull them, there's a stick, there's pain to push them, and there's guardrails to keep them in the focused left to right, and there's benchmarks called re-exams. That's how that works. Okay, that's the lifestyle patient education. Now we're not going to cover that lifestyle. We're not going to cover symptom. So let's do the breakdown analysis of a doctor with their patients and how well their communication skills, their knowledge skills are, how well they're keeping patients. So let's take a look at what we got here. All right, so let's take a look at this. Now, what we're going to do is we take 50 patients. So we take the last 50 patients, and we don't want the last 50. We want to go back 30 days, and that's the starting point. And from that point backwards, we want to take 50 patients. In other words, we want a large enough sample size. We could use 30, but that's the lowest sample size that I'd want. 50 is a large enough sample size to show you a trend. That's why we use 50. Okay. Now you could use 100. That'd even be better, but you're going to see a good trend at 50. Okay. Now, when we go into the patient retention, we mark, like this is an analysis sheet. We'll mark at the top of the sheet. Oh, by the way, the reason we go back 30 days is because they haven't had a time to drop out yet. So if you counted the patients in the last 30 days, you wouldn't have a true statistic, because there still may be people in there that are going to drop out on day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, et cetera. That's why you don't use the last 30 days. Now, having said that, then we'll count on a scale of 1 to 20, like at the top here, you can see 1 to 20, which days, these are the days that they dropped out. So we want to go 1 through 20. We're only going to track 1 through 20. If you are keeping your patients, the vast majority of them, past 20 visits, you're going to have a really good practice. You're going to be seeing 150, 200, 250 patient visits alone right there. So and you're not going to have a functional capacity problem. So now there's 4 areas that patients will drop out. So let's take a look at this and go, there's 4 common areas where patients will drop out. Number 1 is day 1. So here's day 1. So what we do is we look at, where did patients drop out? That tells us a lot. So we can see exactly where the problem is. And once we identify the problem, then we can go right into exactly where the problem is. We can train out that weakness. We can train out that problem. That's how specific we can get. So, and this is how we do it. So you go, okay, we got our 1 through 50, and then we mark the last day that we saw them. So here on day 1, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so he's losing 5. So he's losing 10% on day 1. Okay, so you go to day 2. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he's losing 6. Now that's more than 12% because we've already lost. So it's out of 45. So he's already lost 5. So if you looked at 45, so if you go, he's lost 6 divided by 45. So that's 13%. 13% on day 2. Then you go here, day 3. There's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's go up here, day 4, 1. And then come over here, you got day 1, 2, 3. And let's go here, you go 1, 2. Okay, so he's got 2 here. And then he's got 1 here. So you can see they start to diminish off and how he loses patience. Okay, so and then you just, I got a few. Let's just come over here and go. Okay, so down here, he's got some scattered after, what is that? 9. So only 2. So that's not going to be a big deal. Now, here's how to evaluate it. This is exactly how to find the problem. Now, there's 4 areas that patients will drop out of care. 4. Number 1 is day 1. And all 4 of them are for a different reason. So I'm going to show you how to find the problem. Then we're going to go into how to solve the problem. That's what we're going to do right now. So we listed the patients. We see his trend line. We see his dropout rate. And now we know which day he's losing them the most. Well, on a percentage basis, day 2, but obviously day 1 and 2. So he's losing 11 patients on the first 2 days, which is 11 patients, which is 22%. 22%. Okay. And then if you go, you can see here, he stops around the 6th visit. Let's say the 7th, because he's got 1 more, but it drops off really after, you can see here 3. So if you said 6, he's got 1 more here at 7, but let's just say 6. So in the first 6 visits, so you got 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So 21 patients have dropped out. That's 21, that's 42%. So he's losing 42% of his business in the first 6 visits. Okay. Now, so this is how I'm going to share with you first how to find the problem, then how to interpret the problem, and then how to fix the problem. But this is unbelievably specific, is what I'm getting ready to go into. So we took our sample size of 50. We listed 1 through 20 where they're dropping out. And we can see here where they're dropping out, which day. Now, that's not precise enough. We're going to be more precise than that. So patients drop out typically in 1 of 4 areas. Number 1 is day 1. What's the number 1 reason they will drop out on day 1? You have not established need. In other words, they had enough need to spend the time or money to come to day 1, but they didn't for day 2. So the number 1 reason you didn't get them to day 2 is you didn't establish need, or the second reason, you did a paradigm shift. And that's real common with subluxation doctors when patients come in with back pain, and real quickly the doctor's talking about asthma, allergy, and bedwetting. That's called a paradigm shift. And that increases the defenses and resistance, and it decreases the trust and confidence real fast. And you got to remember, this is early in the relationship. It's day 1 or 2. Okay, so having said that, the second place that they'll drop out typically is the report of findings. So it looks like he's doing his report of findings on day 2. You're doing your report of findings on day 2, right?
Yes.
Now, the reason they'll drop out on day 2 is they had enough need. They had enough need to come in for day 1. They had enough need to come in for day 2. Well, what's happening different on day 2? If you're doing the report of findings on day 2, you're magnifying the 2 obstacles of time or money. So which obstacle is most important that they'll drop out on, or you need to handle the best? Money. So the number 1 reason they'll drop out here is the doctor did not know how to handle terms with money. In other words, the obstacles were too big relative to the perceived need. So it's always a combination. It's always a combination. But on this particular, remember, it's not it's not need right now. Need is not the number one reason because it's day 2. They had enough need to come in for day 2. So it's money relative to need. So it's like a 1-2 punch with money. In other words, the doctor didn't know how to talk terms to make it affordable relative to the patient's perceived need. That's what happened there. Now, when you see patients drop out past that, like let's see if you see them drop out around the like 8 to 12 visit mark over here. Now, that's not what's happening with him. He's not seeing a cluster of patients drop out here. If they are, if you see a large section there, that's symptom care. They just came in for symptom care. They're not buying into what you're saying. They're staying for a few visits. They're feeling better and they're leaving. So whatever system you're using, whatever patient education you're using, it's just not even working. Now, the 4th area that they'll drop out, and we don't track that, is above 20. And the reason we don't track it here on this analysis is if you're keeping your patients, the vast majority of them past the 20 visit, you've got a very good practice. You're, like I said, you're seeing over 150, 200 visits a week. Now, when we do this analysis, like after you're real good at keeping patients, then you want to learn what's called the lifestyle patient education. So the first education to learn is to get them to not give you their system. Their system is market forces. They don't want to come and pay. So the first system is get them to accept, understand, and pay for what's called functional capacity care. Or in our case, it's for all 3 phases of healing: the inflammatory phase, the repair phase, and the remodel phase. That makes a lot of sense to patients, by the way. And then we make it affordable. We know how to talk terms to make it affordable where they go, yeah. That's how we easily keep patients past 20 visits. By the way, the national average is 18. And it's based on the patient's biomarkers. Okay, so now after they get through that, well, they quit unless you have another system in place. And you never want to use chiropractic maintenance care. And the reason you never want to use it is only 3% of the population accepts chiropractic maintenance care. So you have a 97% chance of losing. In other words, would you pick a system where you had a 97% chance of loss? That wouldn't be smart. That would not be smart at all. So we do what's called the lifestyle system. And it's like I said, there's a carrot, there's a stick, there's guidelines, and there's checks. But there's a different focus than their particular problem they came in with right now. And I'm not going to get into lifestyle right now. But that's how you keep patients long-term. We buy lifestyle products all the time. I buy toothpaste all the time. Nobody has to tell me to buy toothpaste. I already know the value system. I bought into it. Okay, so we buy lifestyle products all the time. Okay, so let's get back to here. So you go, okay, now we know. So now we know, here's where the focus of the real, so he's got a big problem in that 42% of the patients are leaving. He's almost losing half of his business, his new business, in 6 visits. That's not good, okay? So where you go, well, where would you start? Well, obviously he doesn't have a good system, or if he does, he's not good at it. 42% is not good. And then you go, well, what's normal? Well, you should only lose 2 to 3% per day that it involves time or money. Day 1 involves time or money. Day 2 involves time or money. See, so the most you should lose is 3% in any one of the days that involve the obstacles, time or money. So on day 1, the most he should lose is 3%. He's losing 10. Day 2 is 3%. He's losing 13. So he's losing 22% versus the most it should be is 6%. But it's a little more than that, because 6% from 22 is 12, 30, 40, 16%. So he will easily have a 16% increase just by knowing how to deal with these 2 days. But that's not really the problem here, because he's losing almost half of his business in 6 visits. So Now, how would I find the specific problem? Well, right now we know what days are causing the problem. So we know he's not establishing need to a large degree on day one. He's not handling obstacles on day two. But what do we really know? They're not buying into a system. Whatever he's doing, they're not buying into, they're leaving. The ones that are staying for symptom care are leaving by the 6th visit. So he doesn't have either he doesn't have a good system or he's not good at it, one or the other. Now, how do I know where the real problem is? So I know day one or day two. So this is how you find out the specific day. But then what we'll even do is we'll do recordings. We'll have the doctor record his day one interaction. We'll have him record his day two interaction. And now we can get unbelievably precise, because let me just give an example. Let's say on day one, there were 10 specific categories that you needed to cover in that order, based on how we buy products and services. And yes, there is a formula of how we buy products and services. Yes, there is. Okay. Well, when we listen to the recording, we can go, well, he did 1, 2, and 3, fine. That's not the problem. And let's say he did 7, 8, 9, and 10, fine. That's not the problem. But when we listen to the recording, we go, wait a minute, 5 and 6 is where he blew it. So then this is how you get very specific to find the problem. First, you got to know what I just shared with you, how to, what's considered normal, and then what days are what happens per day. And then you have to know the category per day that should be happening based on reverse engineering of how we buy products and services. So I listen to the recording and I go, oh, he missed, or he really did a bad job handling the 5th and 6th topic of that day. And that's where he blew it. That's where he lost them. So that's how precise, that's how unbelievably precise we can get with finding the problem. Now comes the second part. How do you solve it? Well, this is how we solve it fast. This is how we find it fast. This is how we solve it fast. And this is why 92% of our doctors that use our patient education program increase their business over $100,000 in 90 days. This is exactly how and why. So what we do, so now we've isolated, we go, okay, let's just say for an example, it's day one, okay? And it's category 5 and 6, all right? Then what we do is we make sure the doctor understands, make sure he sees it and understands, because if you can't see it and understand the mistake, you're just going to keep doing it over and over anyway. So first the doctor has to see it. Then we'll explain what should have happened. And he goes, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. But now the doctor has to go through 4 stages of training. Remember, there's 4 stages of training. There's unconscious incompetence, to conscious incompetence, to conscious competence, to unconscious competence. So the first thing that we've got to do is get the doctor to go from unconscious incompetence, what he doesn't even know that's hurting him, to conscious incompetence. We go, this is the mistake you made. Can you see why you made it? That's conscious incompetence, but that's still not going to fix the problem. Then we got to go to conscious competence, to where he actually can do it at a decent level, where it's not failure, but he's not like great at it. Well, how does that work? That takes role playing. That's where you have to do role playing. You have to engage sensory and motor to go from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. That's what's required. You cannot just watch a video. You have to do sensory and motor. And it's got to be repetitious. And by the way, this is how habits are formed. You know, habits are formed by doing a particular activity over 21 days. That's what creates the neural filament. We already know that. So now we do high repetition And in this case, if it's something real small, we'll break it into something real small and go, okay, let's do 5. Let's not worry about 6. Let's do 5. And let's repeat it. So I may have the doctor do it 20 times, 3 days in a row. See, that works it out of him. That gets him to own that little category fast. You have to do sensory and motor. You have to. By the way, this is how you train staff too. This is how you train, period. So sensory and motor takes you to conscious competence, but we need to be at unconscious competence. We need to be where you just know it by the back of your hand. And that's repetition. So when you do repetition over time by monitoring, that's what takes that skill level to unconscious competence. Well, when you do that, you own it. That's how that's eliminated. So this is how we find the problem. We went to the stats. We found out exactly where this doctor's at. We go, okay, he's got a problem. He definitely has a problem on day 1 and 2, 22% versus 6%. So that could increase 16%. Now, he would be doing a lot better in practice if he wasn't losing this 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, this other 20%, see? But we go, wait a minute. He not only has a little problem at day 1 and a problem at day 2, establishing need and money, they're not even buying into his system. He's losing almost half of his patients, 42% of his patients in the first 6 visits. So with this doctor, I don't even want to use his system. He's got a bad. Now it could be his system's good. He's just bad at it. That's possible. So we'd have to just listen. But I know we got a bad system right now. It's not even working. And the reason I also know that is when we do our patient education and it's based on the science of the 3 phases of healing, even when the doctor's not even good at it, he doesn't even have a good skill level, you will not see this drop out. It makes too much sense to the patient, number 1, and we make it affordable, number 2. It's too easy for the patient to say yes, even when you have low skill levels. You're not a good communicator, you don't deliver it very well, et cetera, et cetera. The concepts are too powerful and they're too personal to the patient because the concepts have nothing to do with chiropractic. They're all based on the patient. The science of the 3 phases of healing is based on the patient, not chiropractic. That's why it works so well. So even if you're not even good at it, you wouldn't even see this. You wouldn't see 42% dropout in the first 6 visits. Okay, so that's how we would analyze this practice. And then you could go, well, how much money are we talking about? Well, a real easy way to think of it is go, take your last year's collections. He's losing 42%, multiply 42%, and that's easily how much money you're losing. So if you collected $300,000, you're losing $42,000 per 100,000. 3 times 42, 4, 8, 12. He's losing over $120,000 by losing 42% of his practice. That's how much money he's losing. And that's not including getting new patients. In other words, he already has it. It's like money in his hand. It's just going right through his hand. So he's losing $120,000 easily that he has in his hand. It's going right through his hand. Well, we got to stop that. And when you learn how to do that, that's when you start keeping patients. You get busier. Well, of course, your cash flow goes up. And then you'll max out. And that's the goal, is to maximize your exchange of time for money. That's the first goal. Then the second goal is then to start maximizing your amount of money per unit of time. What does that mean? Start doing marketing and systems that increase your dollar per visit. That's the second category of creating wealth. Then the next category. Now, remember, we're only looking at one profit center. Remember, there's 4 profit centers in a chiropractic, exchanging time for money. We're only looking at one, the repeat purchase. We haven't even looked at the new patient. So remember, there's 4 areas. There's 4 areas of making money in a chiropractic office. It always starts with the repeat purchase. In chiropractic, that's patient education. So that's the first area we want to clean up. And then we want to get it through past symptom care, in the lifestyle care, in the functional capacity, into lifestyle care. Then we want to maximize the amount of dollar per unit of time. That's when we market and do higher dollar value cases. Then you leverage time, leverage money and time, and that's through staff members and associate doctors and systems. A real simple way to do that is have staff members do preliminary, because now time's the issue, because the doctor's as busy as he can be for the industrial hours. So now we need to leverage time to create more profit. So that there's several little ways. Of course, layout's important. What you're doing is important on how much time it takes, efficiency and all that. But usually now a quick, fast, easy way is adding a staff member that does preliminary examinations, consultations, and patient education. That saves a lot of time for the doctor to see more patients to make more money. And then the next step is the associate doctor. So, and then boom. And then the next step is the next associate doctor. Then the next step is, satellite offices. And then that's exchanging. So the first goal is to maximize your time. In other words, fill the time up that you have. Then the next step is to maximize the amount of money per unit of time. That's higher case averages. Then the next level is leveraging your time and money through staff members, your systems, and associate doctors. And then the next step is leveraging your time and money to create wealth. And the number one system that's created wealth in the United States, 70% of the millionaires become millionaires in real estate, not practicing dentistry, law, or chiropractic. So that's the formula to increasing your profitability, making a good income, to creating wealth. Now, we didn't look at the other 3 profit centers. So we're going to start here. Then we would go to marketing. Okay, where's the strengths and weaknesses with marketing? How much does he know about marketing? We'll do that later. And then we'll look at the fees. How can we maximize the fees? Well, there's multiple ways of maximizing the fees. It's called horizontal and vertical fee structure. And then you look at the overhead last. Of the 4 systems, we'll pay the attention to the overhead last, because that's going to be limited to what you can do there. Where here, growing a practice and leveraging your time and money, that's unlimited. But the goal with overhead, most chiropractors overhead are 50 to 70%. We get it down to 35%. So at least you'll make another 15% with overhead. So that's when you have a real lean machine. When you're maxed out your number of visits, you've got a good case average, you got marketing that knows how to create more business than you physically can handle. And that's educational sales is what that is. That's how I was able to open 77 offices in 20 states. You can't wait around for the 8%. And then you go into your fee structure to start maximizing your fee. There's different ways of doing that. We'll add in a little bit of personal injury, but there's other ways of doing that too. But that's one of the quickest, easiest ways. And then we'll go to the fee structure overhead. And then there's 10 major reasons doctors have high overhead. We'll look into which of the 10, we'll do a practice analysis. Okay, which of the 10 are affecting that doctor? Now we know where to focus with the overhead with that doctor. And that's how you create a very lean machine. And then you replicate it. Then you replicate it with staff, associate doctors, etc. Okay, so that's the short and long of all this. So that's what we're dealing with. So with this doctor, I'm going to talk to him about his patient education. What's it based on? Why is he doing it? We've got to get to know what he does and doesn't know, or what his belief systems are, because he may have a real strong belief system in one way that could be good or bad, to be honest with you. And then mostly, and I'll just tell you what I found. The number one reason for low patient education is, first, the doctor doesn't have a good system, but that's not the number one reason. the number one reason is the doctor has low conviction. He's got low conviction, and usually that's directly associated with low confrontation. That's the reason why a doctor has low patient education. So without knowing any more about this doctor, I go, he's got a bad system. We already know that. And I'd say he's not real good. He's definitely not good at it, with 42% of his business leaving in 6 visits. And I'd probably say he also doesn't have strong conviction, because usually when you have strong conviction, it's a lot easier to, I don't want to use the word sell, but I will. It's a lot easier to sell something when you actually believe it. You know, like me, I talk about the science of the 3 phases of healing to a patient. There's no selling. That's the way it is. That's the way the body works. There's no selling at all. I go into the details and how it relates to that patient and that patient's biomarkers. There's no selling. And then I make it affordable. And by doing that, the patient goes, yeah, that makes sense. I'll take it. And that's when they start staying. And that's that's the first step in building a big practice, is keeping patients. So that's what we'd have to look at first. So in an analysis standpoint, I'm going to look at his system, look at his belief system. What's it based on? What therapy is he doing? Why is he doing them? What does he feel real strong about? You know, some doctors are stronger in some ways, like chiropractic biophysic doctors you'll find are usually pretty strong and they have high conviction. Well, the reason they do is they've studied it. They know the science, because chiropractic biophysics is the most science-based outside of the science of the 3 phases of healing. But that's a therapeutic protocol, the chiropractic biophysics. So typically those doctors have real high conviction, but they got a bad system. They typically use a subluxation system, and patients don't believe that. That's a huge paradigm shift. Huge paradigm shift. So that's what we'll do next. So having said that, so Dr. Seth, does that make sense what I just covered? Are you there, Dr. Seth? All right. I'm sorry, Seth. Sean.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. Now, back to my question here, Sean. Sean, does that make sense what I just covered?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, I want to ask you a couple questions. Do you see how precise that was?
Hmm.
That was not a guess. That was not my opinion. Right?
Yeah, pretty accurate overall.
Okay, now, Sean, you need to know how to do what I just did. Why do you need to know that?
Well, like you said, we're leaving money on the table.
Well, you need to do it to evaluate yourself periodically, right? To find your weaknesses, to correct your weaknesses, to increase your profitability, right?
Oh, yes, I get what you're saying.
What's the other reason you need to know how to do what I just did?
To analyze our data.
Well, that's true, but that's not the reason. The other reason, the number one reason is for you to increase your knowledge and skill level and profitability, right?
Hmm.
How are you going to manage associate doctors if you don't know how to do what I just did?
Yeah, great point.
How are you going to know where any other problem is if you don't know how to break down the statistical analysis like what I just did?
Yeah, can't do it.
You have to know how to do a statistical analysis to increase your profitability in all of these categories. We only covered one, patient education. So you should do this breakdown analysis every 4 months. The life cycle of an active patient is about 4 months. When I say active patient, I'm talking about daily, 3 times a week, twice a week, once a week. That's what I'm talking about. It's about 4 months. So every 4 months, you should break this down until you get the patient retention that you want. Okay? So let me ask you a couple questions. What patient education system are you using? What are you telling the patient?
Um, can you ask that a different way? I'm not really sure. It's just more,
What education are you saying to the patient to get them to stay for care?
it's more of a corrective care approach.
Okay.
So we heavily X-ray almost, everybody unless it's child.
Okay. So
Go
you put
over
a lot of emphasis on the x-rays.
X-rays, yeah.
Okay. Dynamic or static x-rays?
Typically, if they're non-PI, they're going to be static, which I know.
Never say that again out loud.
Yeah, without injury, I should say.
Okay. That's better.
Without injury.
Okay. That's better. Okay. All right. So having said that, now did you learn it from somewhere? Where did you pick it up? Did you piecemeal it? Did somebody teach you that or?
Yeah, we've worked with some other consultants. So,
Okay.
and then we've, kind of made it our own a little bit along the way. Have gotten better.
This
But
is this is getting better.
mm,
42% dropout is getting better.
yeah, yeah, some of those patients, two of those I can, not that it matters, but they were just those out of towners.
Okay,
Um,
that's not how it works, Sean. That's
but
not
yeah,
how statistics work.
yeah, it's not what we want. That's why we're working with you.
Yeah, that's not how statistics work. You don't pick and choose statistics.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you're going to pick the two that went out of town, let's pick the two that stayed forever. That was your mother and father,
Hmm.
and eliminate those. See, you can't cherry pick. Now, after we do a practice analysis like this, then we could come in and go, is there something unusual about this trend? Well, you said two. Is two going to be a major trend?
No, I mean that would be a
No,
small percentage.
no. I'll give you an example though, that I had a doctor who had a huge dropout rate on day one. Because first you do all the statistics, you don't cherry pick. And by the way, there's three things that chiropractors are bad at. One is they don't keep statistics. Two is they cheat on them. And then three is they lie about them. What do I mean by that? They don't keep statistics generally because they don't know what to do, how to interpret them, what they mean. Two, if they do keep statistics, they'll cheat on them. In other words, they won't include the truck driver that came through once and left. They won't include them in the statistic. They'll cherry pick. And then they'll rationalize and justify. They go, oh, well, that was because of the truck drivers. They only came in one day. The big rationalizations I always hear in chiropractic when chiropractors don't do well. There's my insurance, my area doesn't have good insurance. My community is not health minded. Those are the two excuses you always hear from chiropractors. You never hear from the chiropractor, I suck. My skills suck. I don't know as much as I should know to be successful. You never hear that. And the guy that does say that, he acts on it. He takes personal responsibility, he acts on it, and he gets better, and he stops sucking. Okay, but anyway, back to that story I was telling you of an abnormal. So he had a large dropout rate in day one. I go, okay, well, what's going on here? Well, it turns out he did physical exams for like every 6 months for a few nursing homes. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And it wasn't just two. I go, okay, yeah, okay, let's definitely take those out. That's definitely not the normal. But I told him in the beginning, I said, don't you leave anything out. Don't you cherry pick. So we looked at his stats and he had a large percentage of dropout. And that's what happened. He goes, well, these patients are nursing home patients. I contract with a nursing home and I go over there once a month and do their exams. I go, oh, okay. Well, obviously that's not patient education and part of, the patient protocol coming into the office. So as I said, okay, let's take those out. Okay. And by the way, we will look at these. By the way, if you really want to know how good you are, if you really want to know how good you are with your skill level, only take your cash patients. Don't look at don't include personal injury. Don't include major medical. only evaluate your patient retention with your cash patients. And if you really want to know how good you are, who's the most difficult patient to keep? It's not just the cash patient. It's the cold call cash patient, not a referral. The cold call cash patient who came in with a discount offer. That's the hardest patient to keep. If you really want to see how good you really are, only do the statistics on the hardest patient, and you'll see how good you really are. And by the way, the opposite of that is the personal injury patient. I had a doctor one time, he goes, oh, I'm good. My patient retention's good. We did his practice analysis. 96% of his patients were personal injury. So, or 94%. He only had 6% that was actually paying something. So he thought he was good. So we did the breakdown analysis of the 6%. He was losing all of them by the 6th visit. All of them. But he thought he had good patient retention. See? This is the importance of not only keeping statistics, but knowing how to break them down, analyze them, interpret them, and then act on them. Okay, so having said that, so you're doing biophysics. Okay. So what I would do with Sean is I'm going to get into, I'm not going to do it right now because it's a deep dive, but I'm going to get into his belief system. I want to know how deep he is with his belief system, number one. And then I want to hear, what are you doing and saying on day one? What are you doing? In other words, I'm going to have him treat me like a new patient. And I'm going to have him talk to me exactly like I'm a new patient and take me through day 1, day 2, and day 3. I want to see exactly what he's doing. But I already know that his system's not good. So if he had a good system, and let's say he has a real strong belief system, Sean, by the way, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being real strong, how strong do you feel you are with basing the patient's care on the neutral structural analysis?
I would say probably 7.
Okay, I'm surprised. I thought you'd say higher than that. Okay, that's all right. All right, so that's what I would do. And then what I would do is I'd go through the 5 major categories of science and I'd quiz Sean. I'd go, okay, tell me about Wolff's Law. Tell me about Davis's Law. Tell me about Hodge's Law. Tell me about the piezoelectric effect. Tell me about the gate theory. Now, why would I do that? That's going to tell me how much he knows, which is going to tell me his conviction level. That's why. Okay, so that's what we would do with Sean. So the next step I would do with Sean is we obviously have a big group. Now, the good news with this is going to be easy to turn around fast. We're easily going to cut this in half, I'd say in 30, no more than 60 days. It's going to drop from 42% down to 22% in 30 to 60 days. And he'll get it down to, I'd say, 10 to 12% within 90 days. He's going to start keeping about 80% of these practice past 6 visits in 90 days. He's going to shoot up. Now, Sean, I think you said you see about 120 to 130 visits a week.
Yes, for just spinal adjustments. Yeah.
Okay. So here's what's going to happen. If he's at 120, 130, and he's losing 42%, and so we know we're going to keep about 35% of that in 90 days. So let's say 30% within 90 days. Well, 30% of 120, 130 is about 35 visits. He's going to go from 130 visits a week to 160 to 170 in 90 days. That's what's going to happen. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yep.
Now, what's interesting about that is we didn't cover marketing, but what's going to happen is he's getting closer to maximizing his exchange of time for money. Remember, we only have so much time. The average chiropractor can only see about 180 to 220 visits a week, physically, emotionally, because you get busier and busier. There's no place else to put patients. Not just that, but energy. I saw 100 patient visits a day, and it was miserable. I wanted nothing to do with it. That was not a lifestyle. I was beat at the end of the day. So I got to where it was about 70 patients a day, was real comfortable, where I wasn't beat at the end of the day, and about 200 to 230 patient visits. And so training doctors, I found that most of the time they're between about 180 and 220 and how many patients they can process. Now I'm talking about with high efficiency. They're good at their systems. They know how to keep patients. They're good at marketing. Those aren't the issues. Now the issue is a human issue. It's just time and energy. That becomes the limiting factor. So the good news, once he implements the patient retention, he's gonna not need a whole lot of new patients to maximize his time for money. He's going to run right up against 200 visits pretty quick. So as soon as he does this in 60 to 90 days, he's going to shoot up to 170, 175, and he's going to max out at say 200 roughly. Well, it's not going to take very many new patients once he knows the patient education. I mean, you're only talking about maybe 2 or 3 a month, and he's maxed out his exchange of time for money. What does that mean? He now has to bring on his first associate doctor to keep increasing his profitability. That now we're assuming that he has a higher dollar per visit, and he's got good leverage of his systems, and he's got good leverage of staff. So those definitely can be modified to increase efficiencies and productivities. But let's say all of that's done. So he's going to be real close. Now, mark my words. You check back with me in 90 days with Dr. Sean, and he will be right at that 170 plus mark. And he's going to be real close to now needing to hire an associate doctor and keep going. Now, once you know the systems, once you know how to keep them, and then you know educational styles of how to get them, and you know the systems, that's when you maximize, and then you know the system, how to maximize your dollar per visit. Then you replicate it. That's when you learn how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors. That's when life gets exciting, because you're making you're not only making a good income, you're making a disposable income, quality of life, the house you live in, the cars you drive, all that skyrockets. Dinners, vacations, you can pretty much do what you want, pretty much, except you don't have the freedom from your office. So then you learn how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors. That gives you freedom. You can create more business. You can take more time off. And now you're leveraging up your passive income. That's when life gets really fun. That's when chiropractic gets really, really fun. Because now you're playing Monopoly. You're not playing survival. Now you're playing for Park Place instead of Baltic Avenue. Now it's fun.